Technically True by Tanay Pan. Hey everyone, welcome to the sixth episode of Technically True. I'm your host, Tanay Pan. In this episode, we will talk about getting involved in developer relations, interviewing for a DevRel role, choosing your first team, and ensuring growth throughout your career. Today, I'm joined by the one and only Jessica Rose.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Jessica works with Mozilla to help empower and enable volunteer advocates with the Tech Speakers program. She has a keen interest in increasing access to technical education and meaningful work in tech. She mentioned that she always wants to hear about what you're working on.
Oh, I genuinely do, though. So if anybody's out there in, I guess, podcast land, not radio land, and you're working on something cool and weird, yeah, find me on the internet. I almost always want to hear about it.
As you might remember from the fourth episode of our podcast, that Joe Nash mentioned Jessica as one of his favorite speakers.
I'm concerned that he's just being a little bit too nice and generous.
Very warm welcome, Jessica. Would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
I think you've covered sort of the top line, what I get paid for and what I'm interested in. The other stuff is sort of, I'm an American based here in the UK. I was a transitioner, so I moved into tech as an adult. I was a teacher and a linguist before that. And I'm really excited to be chatting to you today because I think developer relations is such an interesting field, both for the ability to sort of get developer-facing products and get developer-facing education in front of communities and in front of people, but it can also be so good for people's careers.
Very true. All right. As we always do, let's start with the rapid fire round. Are you ready?
I'm as ready as I'm going to be.
All right. Your favorite DevRel team?
Oh, heck. No. I've got a polite opt-out. There's a lot of them that I really like right now. Of course, I'm partial to the Mozilla team. Mm-hmm. The Google search team is really good as well. Like they've just hired a bunch of really nice people. Yeah. Neximo just seems to hire all the best and brightest folks I see up and coming. But for me to pick one, and oh gosh, I should add, there's a lot of really fantastic ones I haven't listed. Yeah. I should have opted out of listing any. But there's just so much talent out there and so much like up and coming talent that trying to pick one would be really unfair.
Fair enough. Your dearest procrastination technique?
Oh gosh, that would absolutely be Stardew Valley. It's a video game that's all about farming and personal relationships. It's like admin, but a game.
Ooh, I'm gonna download that today.
No, you've got a life. Don't.
All right. A speaker who you learned the most from?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one as well. I absolutely love Rachel Andrews' talks. She talks about CSS quite a bit, and she's got a very different style than I do, but she just packs this incredible amount of information into a 30 or a 45-minute talk. And she structures it in a way that feels like almost like a lesson plan, where it's very, very clear what the takeaways are and what she'd like people to learn. And I find that so exciting.
A book that you can recommend?
Oh, does it have to be like a tech or business book?
No, whatever you'd like.
This is very nerdy, but I really like the Mandelbaum translation of Metamorphosis. It's just a big old book, beautifully written out. And it's enough like sort of Greek myths to keep you happy and reading for days and days.
That sounds really nice. Okay, favorite city to speak in?
Oh no, this one's hard as well. I almost instantly want to say Birmingham because that's where I'm based and I'm a very big fan of the city. If any of our dear listeners are in tech and they're like, wow, I should relocate someplace, but I don't know where, please come to Birmingham. But I'll also say if I'm not in Birmingham, one of my favorite cities to speak in is Cluj in Romania. It's the only place I've ever gotten a positive heckle. Mm-hmm. And it's very near and dear to my heart. It's great audiences and a beautiful city.
Great. And the last one, the topic you're most passionate about.
Oh gosh. Do you know what? This is going to get kind of abstract very quickly. So I haven't spoken about this yet, but it's been something I've been thinking about for years and years. And it's the way we develop and the way we build the web is increasingly more and more separate and more isolated from the way most people access the web. So like, what would a future of web development, what would the future of the web look like if we started meeting people on the technology or on the platforms that they use? So what would the web look like without keyboards? What would the web look like on lo-fi devices? What would the web look like, if we all stopped using fancy high-end Macs and sort of met people where they live?
Yeah, that's well said. Cool. This was fun. Jessica and I met last year at the Tech Speakers Workshop in Paris. And for those of you who don't know, this is the program which got me started with public speaking.
Oh, did
And
it?
yeah.
I didn't know. Oh, because you're fantastic. I just assumed you were always fantastic.
Oh, thank you very much.
How that works.
And Jessica has been an amazing mentor and feedback coach at the Tech Speaker Meetup. So Jessica, how did you first get involved in this world of public speaking and DevRel?
Do you know what? This is it's a less glamorous story than I'd like it to be, but I gave my first talk because I really wanted to go to a conference, a specific conference, and couldn't really afford it. And it said like, oh, speakers get to go to the conference for free. I was like, speakers get to go to the conference for free. I often tell folks looking to get into public speaking not to worry. Almost no one likes their first talk. And I didn't like my first talk. Hopefully there was some value for the audience, but if I could go back and do it again, I would. And I was kind of using that as a cheat code for a little while where I was like, oh, wow, conferences can be hundreds or even thousands of pounds. And you've got me here on the podcast. I've clearly got a lot that I think I want to say. So I spoke at a couple more and I like to think I became a little bit of a better speaker. But I kept running into the same people. And eventually they told me like, oh, hey, this is actually a job. You can have a job, which is focusing on developer outreach.
Yeah.
And as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, I'm going to get that.
Yeah, that's a great story. Personally, for me, one of the strongest incentives, at least initial incentives for public speaking was traveling to new places. And over time, the thing I liked the most about this was meeting new developer communities, engaging with them, and of course, sharing what I've been working on.
And the ability to bring that back is so valuable as well. So I love being in a meeting or in a discussion with somebody and being able to say like, oh, hey, I met somebody in Riga who's working on this. Or, hey, I think we really need to take a look at how folks in Taipei are using apps right now.
Yeah.
So being able to say like, it's not just broadcast, that you're also taking that information back. And if it doesn't sound very businessy, and sharing it with internal stakeholders.
Yeah. I mean, advocacy is essentially a two-way communication, right?
Yeah.
And for people looking to get their first gig in developer relations, what can they do to get into this field? Like, does it make more sense to transition from a functional role like engineering or product, or is it possible to acquire skills during college or internships and directly start off with DevRel as your first full-time role?
So, I often recommend folks who want to sort of invest in lifelong technical skills to work as a developer or work on product or work, this is often overlooked, but like work in technical writing for a year, like early in their career. If our dear listener is looking to get into tech, a lot of places folks just stay in jobs for a year or two. So it sounds weird coming from teaching to say, oh, work this job for a year and then move into DevRel.
Yeah.
But it's less weird in tech. I don't think you necessarily have to work on product or work on documentation or write code before you move into DevRel. I think that kind of sort of social proof professionally can make it quite a bit easier. When I talk to new folks about getting into DevRel, I often talk about there being a bunch of different sort of pillars. Think about it if you are a tabletop role-playing character, that you've got like different buckets you can put your skills points in. And we're talking about speaking now. So public speaking or online presentations is absolutely one of those areas. But I'd say writing is just as important, if not quite a bit more. Debugging, I often consider support really underrated in DevRel, but like doing the support is so valuable.
Right, because you get to see what problems people are actually facing.
Yeah. And if we're talking right now to somebody who's interested in getting into developer relations, like first off, How exciting. Absolutely do it. Don't get burned out. But there's no real one way to do it. And one of the big challenges I see people have is just getting that first job. So once you have developer relations on your resume or on your CV, get your second job and third job and fourth job get a lot easier. But it's a lot like your first job in tech overall. Getting somebody to take the chance on you initially can be really hard.
Yeah. And speaking of first jobs, like what was your first official DevRel position?
So yeah, I got in a kind of weird way where I did a lot of community work, a lot of unpaid work, which I don't necessarily recommend folks do.
Yeah.
And I became sort of a contracting consultant to developer relations before I worked permanent roles. So my first one was for a company that's been bought, I think. I don't think it exists anymore, called Dream Factory. And yeah, I built a small team there in my first role, which again, it happens. But looking back, I think I would have maybe wanted to start out under an experienced manager before jumping in and trying to learn it all at the same time.
So like if you were to say the most important things that you learned, what were the most crucial takeaways for you from that position?
So it was a family company. It was a family business. And while I had a really interesting experience, I don't think I'd work at a family business again.
Okay.
Which is just sort of general advice from restaurants to painting to tech. Like, hey, maybe family-run businesses have their own politics, their own complexities.
Yeah.
I think the big thing I learned in that role, and the thing I'm the most proud of, is to very pointedly advocate for my team. I think a lot about management these days, and I think a lot about ethics in management. And advocating for your team members and advocating for your team is something I think about a lot coming out of that role. I got really lucky. I hired absolutely brilliant people. So I was working with Alex and Tracy. Sorry. Oh gosh, like everybody's going to know Alex and Tracy. But they've very deservedly gone on to like very fancy jobs. Yeah, I think maybe I've reinforced the value of hiring people smarter than me in that role.
That's inspiring. And for people just getting started with DevRel as their first position, they usually have two broad choices, right? You can join a startup where there are just a handful of or no colleagues with you in DevRel, or you can join a bigger company with a more established DevRel team. With startups, on one hand, you have the opportunity of building a team, starting something from scratch. But on the other hand, you might have to face a lot of resistance and educate a lot of people. With bigger teams and bigger companies, you will have a lot of colleagues to help you get started, but it can be easy to get lost in the corporate identity. So which is a better choice for people looking to get started?
I think it's almost a philosophical choice on some level. So if you hate sleeping and love arguing, maybe that small scrappy startup where you're the first hire or the only hire is going to be a good place to go. Let's say you don't necessarily like arguing as much. This might be a place where you want to come into an established DevRel team and say, hey, I'm going to join this team. I'm going to work on these specific things and try and find a way for my voice to stand out amongst all the corporate branding.
Yeah. And you mentioned that a few days ago, you gave a talk at DevRelCon about the full life cycle of DevRel careers. And I saw that you covered growing as well as future-proofing your career while working in DevRel. Would you like to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so it's really mirrored the conversation we're having today. So I chatted quite a bit about getting into DevRel. It's one of those unfortunate talks where I think that if you want to cover the whole life cycle, you're always going to be boring some of the audience through part of the talk. So talk quite a bit about, hey, if you're just looking to get into DevRel, being at a conference like this was a great idea. Good for you. And here are ways I counsel people into the industry. But I've got some really actionable takeaways. So if you're in a DevRel role right now, there's really, really focused stuff you can be doing to sort of improve your future. And this is going to sound a little bit patronizing and it's going to sound a little bit basic. But the one first thing I counsel folks to do to improve their future career is just not to sort of destroy it. So it's a little basic. I think with DevRel, you're in a really high context social situation a lot of times. There's a lot of events. There's a lot of free beer, which is still weird to me. There's a lot of, high stakes, high pressure social interactions. So the first thing to do is just, make an effort to not embarrass yourself for your company. So go easy on the free beer. Try not to swear on stage unless that's sort of what you're going for. Take everyone you meet as seriously as you can. I see a lot of folks getting into DevRel where some of the older guard has a little bit of a rock star image. So new folks coming up are like, oh, I'm a rock star too. Where I'm like, no, we just work in tech. Stop it. Don't take yourself too seriously. Don't be a jerk, and take other people more seriously than you take yourself often.
Words to live by. And while applying for the first DevRel position, what are some of the things that should be kept in mind?
Oh gosh, so if you're interviewing, my first and most persistent advice is going to be getting your first DevRel job sucks. It's hard. You've got to convince somebody you can do this job you've never done before. Oftentimes, you've got to convince someone to hire you for a job that they're not sure they know how to hire for.
Right.
Getting your first job in DevRel is going to be miserable. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's really true.
Past that, like, have a really clear story. Have a sort of, I don't want to say pitch, but I'm going to say pitch. Like, be able to come into an interview. And this isn't just DevRel. This is any kind of looking for work.
Yeah.
And be able to quickly and concisely and elegantly tell the story of who you are and what you want to do and what you want to do with them. So sound a little bit excited. Companies love when you sound excited. But just, hey, I'm Jessica Rose. I've been working with early stage startups with an open source backbone for some time. And I'm really excited about grassroots developer outreach. I want to work at Mozilla because I'm looking for an opportunity to sort of scale that up and work more closely with volunteers.
Yeah.
That pitch worked. So please roll your own.
Right. And let's talk a bit now from the perspective of the interviewers, for folks out there looking to build or expand their DevRel teams, right? And do you have any advice on how an ideal interview process should look like? Any specific do's and don'ts?
So the first thing I'm going to say is going to sound really basic as well, but a bunch of people who are listening are going to feel a little bit guilty as I say this. The first thing, just like in DevRel, where the first thing to future-proof your job is to not screw it up, the first thing I want you doing in your DevRel hiring is to not screw it up, which sounds a bit vague. Make sure you're responding to emails. Make sure you're tracking folks to the pipeline. Make sure you respond to people. Like, even if you don't want to hire this person, go ahead and tell them. You might not want to hire them now, but you may want to hire them in a year or 2 years. And you may want to hire their friends. Like, DevRel is this little tiny pool of people. Be cool to them.
Yeah, that's really true. Something that we're hearing a lot about these days, especially from DevRel professionals, is burnout, right? And with a lot of travel, social and speaking engagements, it's not difficult to understand why that happens. So what are some of the things that people, especially those who are new in the field, should look out for?
Oh, gosh. So this is going to be, I'm so sorry that this may be a sort of do as I say, not as I do kind of thing, but take all of your vacation. Be deeply suspicious of companies that want to, specifically American companies who want to give you unlimited paid time off. Like, that's almost always a trap. There almost always seems to be like some social expectation you won't take it.
Okay.
But take your holidays, and when you take your vacation, completely log off, which can feel scary. But that big thing you're thinking about, that report or that talk or that quarterly thing, is way less important than you think it is. And it won't be important in 5 years. Like, take your vacation, log off, and be checking in with yourself. Like, one big tell that I use for when I'm getting burned out is when I start telling myself, do you know what? I only need to get through these next 2 weeks, or I only need to get through this last thing, and then I'm free.
Right.
And for me, whenever I start thinking of things in time chunks that are almost obstacles, like, oh, I just need to get through this quarterly review and then I'm done. That's almost always a sort of red flag that maybe it's time to take some time off and log off.
Yeah. Sort of have a digital detox. maybe. All right. Are we missing something, Jessica? Anything else you'd like to convey to the universe?
I would go ahead and say as well that developer relations isn't necessarily sort of a once and done thing. Like, yeah, so I'd go ahead and say we've talked about getting into developer relations and like not burning any bridges while you're there.
Right.
I'd like to talk really briefly about like what happens after your DevRel role, or what happens after a couple of DevRel roles, what happens after hopefully you haven't gotten burned out. Because folks working in developer relations, folks working in outreach, have this really fantastic sort of superpower. You're effectively getting paid to network.
Yeah.
On behalf of your company, of course, do what your company needs within the boundaries of your own ethics and burnout.
Mm-hmm.
But this can be really beneficial for you as an individual as well. So having really clear ideas and taking notes and saying, hey, I might want to be at one of these companies next. I might want to do these kinds of things next. Just coming in with a really open mind and saying, hey, here's what all these other people are doing. Where might I want to see myself after this or after this? I've seen folks go into academia, go into research, go into development, go into technical writing. I've seen a lot of folks go ahead and break away and do their own weird startups. Like, it sounds very naive and very starry-eyed, but yeah, just the incredible amount of future opportunities that come out of this role are so exciting to me.
Yeah, very true. Thanks a lot for joining us today, Jessica. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Technically True. I'm at @Tane1337 on Twitter, and I would love to know what you'd like to listen in the next episode. Until then, peace out. You have been listening to Technically True, a podcast about public speaking, developer relations, and technology, hosted and produced by Tane Pan.